I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 17508 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran, and in this episode, another selected Vietnam veteran. That Vietnam veteran is none other than John Shoemaker, who has already been on this podcast before, telling us about things like the ghost soldiers at Cam Duck and other things. I asked John to come on this podcast episode and tell us about what he has done since he left the military. As often as I can, I always make this statement. The Vietnam veteran generation is as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. Vietnam veterans have been proving that for 50 years, ever since they came home from that war. They have been demonstrating in a wide array of pursuits, both military and civilian, that Vietnam veterans are as good as any of them out there. John's going to tell us about his background that will totally verify that statement. He has done some amazing things since he left the military. I'm going to ask him to tell you all about it. He's going to start out giving a little background as to why he went into the military service in the first place in the middle of a very difficult war that was going on. He's going to tell us about that, and then he's going to tell us what motivated him after he left the military and how his military service helped him to become a success as a civilian. He is retired now from the industries that he worked in, but he's still serving his community in political offices, serving on condo associations, and whatever. I get so excited hearing his story because he is one of those who has contributed to the greatness of America. When I do hear his story, I keep thinking over and over, thank God for Americans like John Shoemaker. And now, without any further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone and this podcast over to John so he can tell you in his own words about what he has done to contribute to the greatness of America. John, it's all yours. Go for it.
To give some background as to what I did after the war, I need to just at least note that I joined the Army straight out of UMass Amherst specifically to become an officer. I wanted to find out what I was made of. Did I have the mettle for war? Could I handle it when the bullets started flying? And I wanted to lead men because I felt I could save lives. I had my act together that I could save lives. And the only way I could have my act together was to go to every training opportunity I could get. That's why basic, advanced training, airborne school, becoming a paratrooper, OCS, became a training officer, jungle school in Panama. All of that set me up for 2 years of training. And I wanted to then go to Vietnam for sure. And as a citizen soldier, I had no interest in becoming a veteran or a long-term lifer, as they call them. I would get out. So after Vietnam, I came back. Now, I have to say, after jump school and before OCS, I got married. And a year later, sure enough, we have our son. And the song at that time, I remember Blood, Sweat, and Tears so vividly. There's one son born in this old world to carry on. And so I looked at my son as my blood, that if anything happens to me, he could carry on. And with that, I was very fortunate, although I was wounded. Yes, I got a lot of recognition and so forth. I did not want to go on and become a captain, major, and all that. And so I came back, and, I didn't know what I could do except here I have a business degree, and I know I can lead men in battle. So what do you do at that time? Well, I went to a couple of recruiters, and one recruiter said, look, you're not going to be a lawyer. You're not going to be a doctor. What else can you do? And I said, I can shoot, and I'm not afraid of much. He said, well, then I'm going to put you in sales. So he sent me over to Xerox Corporation. And Xerox at that time was like IBM. They were at the top of their game, and they were doing really well as a corporation, and they had invented the xerography and the Xerox machines and all that stuff. And so I went for an interview, and this becomes important because I was going to interview to be a salesman. And you could say that a salesman are like on the first line of battle because they're the ones that have got to go out and capture an order and help the company grow. So I viewed it that way. And so I went in for an interview, and the manager started asking me all these questions about, what's it like to be in sales and how tough it is. And he tried to explain it in this really hard thing to do. And he mentioned this concept of call reluctance. And I said, wait a minute, call reluctance. Yeah, people, they have a certain reluctance to bang on doors, cold calling, and, just talk to somebody and make it happen. That is, start a conversation with somebody you don't know behind a door in a building, and you'll have to do it, every day, including Friday at 4:30 when you'd want to go home. You have to stay there and keep working it. And people are reluctant to bang on that door and go through. And so I said to him, I said, wait a minute. On the other side of that door, do they have a gun? And he laughed. He said, well, of course not. I don't get it. I don't see what there's anything to be afraid of. So he hired me, and I went on to have a very good career with Xerox in sales management, promoted every 2 or 3 years. And then I decided to leave and join some other high-tech companies in communications, computer software, computer hardware. And I went through half a dozen companies at the executive VP level, and then eventually became executive vice president for a company that does toll tagging, radio frequency identification. If you've got a toll tag in the east or in the west or in the south or in the southeast, Sun Pass, Cold, Quick Pass, Fast Pass, you name it. Well, that technology is all RFID, and I was involved with a company that would either sell the hardware, provide the technology for it, or support it and service it. Did that for a number of years. Then I started doing a couple startups, one of which was to put RFID tags inside bag tags at airports so that, as in the case of the very first airport in the world to do this, I sold them a $25 million project. Now, this is 20 years ago, to put an RFID tag inside the barcoded tag of your bag that you get at the counter. And when they put it on that conveyor, they can read that bag wherever it is on the conveyor automatically without having to, have a barcode reader. And it would read that bag as it's coming down the conveyor, and as it approaches a explosive detection machine, it would read the tag. It would go into the machine. It would take a picture of the bag as an X-ray, and then as it left the machine, and all that's recorded with the picture, so they know every bag was bomb-free and where it was, at what time, and where it needed to go, at what time it needed to get on that plane. That opened up the whole world of using RFID for tracking everything, whether it's bag tags or logistics for Walmart on cartons and so forth. In any event, I went on to be, honestly, fairly successful in that kind of a career. I think I did make a contribution. I know that it provided well for my family and my 2 children. They have since grown up and have become reputable members of the community, very successful, as it turns out, very successful. I now have succeeded with my career, and I decided, okay, now that that's over, now that I'm 70, what do I do? I spent a year and I thought about it, and I decided to contribute back and ran for political office in my local town. I was appointed won the opportunity to be a commissioner on our town council for the Highland Beach, the town of Highland Beach in Florida. And so now I spend time working on issues for the town, for the betterment of the community and for its residents. And as well, I'm on a member of the board for the local condominium community of 200 units. And so in that way, I'm contributing back rather than just focus on a career where I'm making money to survive and thrive and bring up a family. So in any event, that has brought me to this day where I can reflect upon what I've done and still work on what I am doing.
John, you have just made a liar out of every one of those people back in the day who said bad things about Vietnam veterans. You've proven exactly what I always say. The Vietnam veteran generation is as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from our country. And, you know, I think you typify what I say is when we came back from Vietnam, we were older, wiser, stronger, and better able to deal with adversities than our non-Vietnam veteran contemporaries. What you've done with your life exactly typifies that statement. And I think you live it out. And because of what you've done, can you imagine all the lives that you've affected and people are living better lives because of what you did? And I really think that you were motivated by your experiences in Vietnam. So I think that's just a wonderful story. You had to suffer a little bit in Vietnam and everything, but I think it paid off for the country.
I think what's important is that when I got out of the military, I did decide, although I had a bachelor's degree, I used the GI Bill, which really wasn't that much money, but it helped me enough because I was broke at the time, to go night school and get my master's degree while still in the Army Reserves, while having a family and a full-time job. It was a time of focus on learning, getting the education, and always taking as much responsibility as I could get. I had no problem with jumping forward into positions that I had never done before, and nothing would intimidate me in that regard. But certainly, it is an important aspect of a career, and you're always committed to learning. I'm still learning. I'm still reading, even now.
That is a tremendous story, and all I can say is, if anybody wants any inspiration, just look at your story. John Shoemaker's story, and if you don't get inspired, there's something wrong with you. I am so happy that I set up this podcast so that people like you can be heard and everybody will know about what you did in Vietnam and everyone else. And you can talk all day about the reasons for it and the results and why we were there and all that, but you cannot deny what young Americans did over there. It was a great job. They did a great thing. And I just really appreciate it. I can't say how much I appreciate you telling us about it. And I am looking forward to podcast episodes to come where you're going to tell us more about these stories. And as I read your bibliography on the website, airborneocs.org, and some of these titles, I'm looking forward to hearing them. I appreciate so much you coming on and telling us a little bit more about what happened out at Cam Duck, that exciting, I call that the Claymore story. And this story about what you've done since you left Vietnam is so inspirational, I can't believe it. And it is such an example to people. And it just burns me up when I hear people say that most of the Vietnam veterans, when they came back, a lot of them lived under bridges and they were drug addicts and they were just ruined. And there may be some of those out there, but I really believe the vast majority of them, in their own capacities like you did, came back and continued serving their country in a different way. And I just can't say enough how much I appreciate you sharing your story with us so that it verifies what I was saying about these Vietnam veterans. I thank you so much, and I'm looking forward with great anticipation to when you return and tell us some more stories about your time in the 196th in the Americal Division. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mac. I really appreciate your time and effort as well.
What a story, what a story. This is Mac Payne here, closing out episode 1758 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these stories. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to hear more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?